Welcome to St. Mary's Hollow, a sleepy village hiding a deadly secret. When Miss Jane Marple arrives to visit her friend Clara, she uncovers a chilling conspiracy. Poisonings, stolen treasures, and anonymous letters tearing the town apart. From midnight meetings to a dangerous churchyard showdown, watch Miss Marple's sharp mind unravel a web of lies, expose a murderer, and restore peace. Will she catch the mastermind before it's too late? Dive into this thrilling mystery now. Chapter 1. The arrival in St. Mary's Hollow *. Miss Jane Marple stepped off the train. Her small, neat shoes tapping the wooden platform of St. Mary's Hollow. The air smelled of damp leaves and coal smoke, and a thin autumn mist curled around the sleepy village. She adjusted her hat, a simple thing with a single feather, and let her sharp eyes wander. The station was quiet, just a few crates stacked by the ticket booth and a lone porter yawning. Miss Marple, though, never missed a detail. She noticed two men near the station's edge, Mr. Harold Grayson, the butcher, and Dr. Ernest Finch, the village doctor. Their heads were close, voices low, and their quick glances screamed trouble. Grayson's meaty hands clenched, and Finch's thin lips twitched. Something was off, and Miss Marple's mind, quick as a fox, tucked the moment away she was here, at the invitation of her old friend, Mrs. Clara Henshaw. A widow with a cozy cottage and a knack for spotting what others missed. Clara's letters had grown odd lately, full of hints about strange goings-on in the village. Nothing clear, just enough to make Miss Marple pack her bag and catch the first train. Clara had written of whispers, missing treasures, and a village on edge. Miss Marple, who loved a puzzle more than most, couldn't resist. Now, as she stood on the platform, her small suitcase in hand, she felt the familiar tingle of a mystery waiting to be unraveled. Clara appeared, her round face breaking into a smile, though her eyes darted nervously. "Jane, you're here," she called, hurrying forward in a wool shawl. Her hug was warm, but Miss Marple felt the tremble in her friend's hands. "It's so good to see you," Clara said, her voice a touch too bright. "The village? Well, it's not the same lately." Miss Marple nodded, her calm smile hiding the gears turning in her head. "A cup of tea and a chat will sort things out," she said, her tone light but firm. Clara's relief was plain as they walked toward the cottage, the village unfolding around them. St. Mary's Hollow was all charm on the surface stone walls, thatched roofs, and flower boxes spilling with late blooms. But Miss Marple saw more. Curtains twitching, faces peering, and a quiet that felt heavy, like a held breath. The cottage was a picture of comfort, with chintz curtains and a fire crackling in the hearth. Clara fussed with the teapot, her hands shaky as she poured. Miss Marple settled into a chair, her knitting bag at her side. The needles would come out soon, their steady click a cover for her thoughts. "Now, Clara," she said, her voice gentle but direct, "tell me what's got you so rattled." Clara sat, clutching her cup. "It's hard to pin down, Jane. The village feels wrong. Things go missing, important things, like my husband's gold watch, the one he got from his father. It was locked in my safe, and now it's gone. Then there are these letters, nasty ones sent with no name. They accuse people of all sorts, cheating, lying, worse. No one knows who's sending them, but it's stirring up bad blood." Miss Marple's eyes narrowed, though her face stayed soft. "Letters, you say? And when did they start? About 3 months ago?" Clara said. "At first, folks thought it was a prank, but they kept coming. Mrs. Tuttle at the post office sees them all, and she's got a tongue that wags. Says they're typed, not handwritten, which is odd for here. And then there's Mr. Blackwood, an old man, who lived alone. He died sudden, and some say it wasn't natural." Miss Marple's knitting needles appeared, clicking softly as she worked a pale blue scarf. "Not natural? Tell me about this Mr. Blackwood." Clara leaned closer, her voice dropping. "He was a loner, kept to his cottage on the hill. Rich, they say, but stingy, always muttering about secrets in the village. like he knew something big. Dr. Finch said it was his heart, but Amos was tough as old boots. And right before he died, he told the vicar he was going to set things right. Then, poof, he's gone. Miss Marple's needles paused, just for a second. And these letters, do they mention Blackwood? Not that I've heard, Clara admitted. But they've got everyone looking sideways. Harold Grayson's been at Dr. Finch's throat, saying he's hiding something about Amos. And the vicar, Reverend Wells, he's jumpy as a cat. Even young Tom Carver, the blacksmith's boy, seemed scared. It's like the village is unraveling. Miss Marple nodded, her mind sorting facts like cards. The missing watch, the letters, Blackwood's death. And that tense moment at the station, it all pointed to something bigger. A web with threads she'd yet to see. Let's not jump to conclusions, she said, her voice soothing. A village is like a quilt, pull one thread, and the pattern shows. We'll find it. Clara managed a small smile. You always make things sound so simple, Jane, but I'm glad you're here. Will you stay a while? As long as it takes, Miss Marple said, her eyes twinkling. She sipped her tea, but her thoughts were elsewhere, already chasing the shadows Clara had described. The next morning, Miss Marple set out to explore St. Mary's Hollow. She wore her usual tweed coat and sensible shoes, her hat tilted just so. To anyone watching, she was a harmless old lady, but her eyes missed nothing. The village green was quiet, with a few children kicking a ball and a dog snoozing by the fountain. She passed the butcher's shop, where Mr. Grayson was hacking at a slab of meat, his face red and grim. Across the street, Dr. Finch's office had a sign saying back at noon, though it was barely 10. Miss Marple filed that away. Her first stop was the post office. It's a tiny place with a bell that jingled as she entered. Mrs. Violet Tuttle. A plump woman with sharp eyes stood behind the counter, sorting mail. Miss Marple smiled sweetly, asking for stamps, but lingering to chat. Such a charming village, she said, but Clara tells me there's been some trouble with letters. Mrs. Tuttle's eyes lit up, eager to spill. Aye, those wretched things. Typed, they are, and full of poison. Accusing Mr. So-and-so of stealing, or Miss whoever of worse. I've seen M come through plain envelopes, no return address. Started 3 months back, and they've got folks at each other's throats. Miss Marple nodded, her face all sympathy. How dreadful. And no clue who's behind it. Not a one, Mrs. Tuttle said, leaning in. But I reckon it's someone close, knows too much. They do. Why, just last week, one came for Miss Lavinia Price, calling her a busybody. She was fit to be tied. Miss Marple tucked that name away. Lavinia Price. Well, hope it stops soon, she said. Buying her stamps and leaving with a polite nod, Mrs. Tuttle's gossip was gold. But it only scratched the surface. Next, she headed to the village hall, where a meeting about the Harvest Festival was underway. The room was packed with villagers, their voices buzzing. Miss Marple slipped into a back row, her knitting in her lap, looking like she belonged. Reverend Wells, a thin man with nervous hands, stood at the front trying to keep order. Mr. Grayson was there, his loud voice cutting through the chatter. We've got bigger problems than pumpkins, he barked, glaring at Dr. Finch, who sat stiffly nearby. Like why certain folks can't be trusted with our health. Dr. Finch's face went tight. That's slander, Harold. And you know? Amos Blackwood's death was a tragedy, not a crime, was it? Grayson shot back, his eyes hard. Koo signed the papers quick enough. The room went quiet, all eyes on the two men. Reverend Wells cleared his throat. Now, let's focus on the festival. We're here to plan, not argue. Miss Marple's needles clicked, her face blank but her mind racing. Grayson's anger wasn't just personal, it had purpose. And Finch's defense was too sharp, like a man hiding a crack in his armor. She also noticed Miss Lavinia Price, a bony woman with a pinched face, watching Finch with quiet fury. There was history there, and Miss Marple meant to find it. After the meeting, she lingered, letting the crowd thin. She approached Reverend Wells, who was stacking chairs. "Such a lovely village," she said, her voice warm. "Claudius told me so much." Though she mentioned poor Mr. Blackwood. "A sad loss, I hear." Wells fumbled a chair, his face pale. "Yes, very sad. His heart, you see? It happens." "Of course," Miss Marple said, her eyes kind but piercing. "Still, sudden deaths do stir talk, don't they?" Wells nodded too quickly. "They do, but it's just talk. Excuse me, I've duties." He hurried off, leaving Miss Marple. With a clear picture, the vicar was scared. Back at the cottage, Clara was baking, the smell of scones filling the air. Miss Marple settled by the fire, her knitting steady as she shared her morning. "The village is a pot ready to boil over," she said. "Grayson and Finch are at odds, and this Blackwood business is at the heart of it. Those letters, too, there? No prank. Someone's pulling strings." Clara set down a plate of scones, her face worried. "What about my watch, Jane? It's not just money. It's all I have of Henry." Miss Marple patted her hand. "We'll find it, dear. It's tied to the rest, I'm sure. A thief doesn't stop at one prize, and a liar doesn't stop at one tale." That evening, as they ate supper, Clara brought out a letter she'd kept hidden. "This came yesterday," she said, her voice small. "I didn't want to scare you." Miss Marple unfolded it, her face calm but her eyes sharp. Typed like the others, it read, "Keep your guests quiet, or she'll regret it." No signature, just cold intent. "Well," Miss Marple said, folding it neatly, "that settles it. Someone's watching, and they're afraid." "Good." Clara blinked. "Good. Yes," Miss Marple said, her smile sly. "A scared villain makes mistakes. And I'm rather good at spotting those." As Clara cleared the table, Miss Marple's needles clicked, her mind weaving the day's clues. Grayson's temper, Finch's secrets, Wells' nerves, Lavinia's glare. And those letters, they were pieces of a bigger picture. Blackwood's death was no accident. She'd bet her best hat on it, and Clara's watch, stolen for a reason, not greed. The village was a stage, and someone was directing a nasty play. Miss Marple, though, was no mere audience. She'd find the script, and soon she looked out the window at the darkening village, its lights soft in the mist. St. Mary's Hollow seemed peaceful, but Miss Marple knew better. Trouble was brewing, and she was just the woman to stir it up. Chapter 2. The village whisperers * Miss Jane Marple woke early, soft light of dawn slipping through the chintz curtains of Clara's cottage. The fire in the hearth had died to embers, and the air held a crisp autumn chill. She dressed in her usual tweed coat and sensible shoes, her hat pinned neatly in place, her mind sharp as ever. Buzzed with yesterday's clues, the tense exchange between Mr. Grayson and Dr. Finch, Clara's missing watch, the anonymous letter, and the whispers of Amos Blackwood's suspicious death. St. Mary's Hollow was a puzzle, and Miss Marple loved nothing more than finding the pieces. Today, she'd dig deeper. Starting with the village's pulse, the gossip that flowed like a river over breakfast. Clara set out porridge and jam, her hands still shaky from last night's threatening note. "Jane, are you sure it's safe to poke around?" she asked, her voice low. "That letter scared me." Miss Marple spooned her porridge, her calm smile steady. "Here's what they want, Clara, but a bully only wins if you back down. We'll be careful, but we won't stop." Her tone was firm, like a teacher soothing a nervous child. Clara nodded, though her eyes stayed worried. "I'm off to see the village," Miss Marple said, picking up her knitting bag. "Gossip's better than a map for finding trouble. Keep your ears open, dear, and don't touch that letter. It's evidence." She patted Clara's hand and stepped out. The morning mist curling around her ankles. St. Mary's Hollow sparkled in the early light, its stone cottages and winding lanes picture perfect. But Miss Marple saw the cracks. A curtain flicked back. Too fast, a shopkeeper's forced smile, the way folks glanced over their shoulders. The village was on edge, and she meant to find out why. Her first stop was the bakery, a warm little shop with the smell of fresh bread wafting out. Mrs. Elsie Dodd, the baker's wife, was behind the counter, her round face flushed from the ovens. Miss Marple bought a loaf, lingering to chat. Such a pretty village, she said, her voice sweet. Clara's told me all about it, though she mentioned some trouble letters, I hear. Mrs. Dodd's eyes widened, eager to talk. Oh, those awful things. Typed not a bit of handwriting and full of lies. They've been coming for months, stirring up all sorts of mess. Why? One said Mr. Grayson's been cheating folks on his meat prices, and another claimed Miss Lavinia Price was spying on her. Neighbors, it's got everyone jumpy. Miss Marple nodded, her face all sympathy. How dreadful. And no one knows who's sending them. Not a clue, Mrs. Dodd said, leaning closer. But they know too much. Like they're watching us. I reckon it's someone right here, maybe even someone we trust. She glanced out the window as if the letter writer might be lurking. Miss Marple tucked the loaf in her basket, her mind filing away every word. Well, I hope it stops soon, she said, leaving with a polite smile. Mrs. Dodd's chatter confirmed what Clara had said. The letters were typed, frequent and personal. Someone with a grudge or a plan was pulling the village apart. Next, she strolled to the village green, where a few stalls were setting up for the day's market. She paused by a flower cart, pretending to admire the chrysanthemums while listening to two women nearby. They were Mrs. Tuttle, the postmistress from yesterday, and Miss Lavinia Price, the spinster Clara had mentioned. Their voices were low, but Miss Marple's ears were sharp. It's a disgrace, Lavinia hissed, her bony hands clutching a shawl. Those letters are tearing us apart. And I don't trust that Dr. Finch one bit. Always sneaking about, him and that Grayson. Mrs. Tuttle nodded, her eyes gleaming with gossip. I saw another letter this morning addressed to the vicar, typed like the rest. I reckon it's about Amos Blackwood. Folks say he didn't just die, someone helped him along. Miss Marple's knitting needles appeared, clicking softly as she moved closer, still eyeing the flowers. Lavinia's voice dropped. Amos knew something, Violet. He told me himself, said he'd expose a rotten core in the village. Then? He's dead, and Finch signs it off as natural. Convenient, isn't it? Mrs. Tuttle gasped. You think Finch? I think plenty, Lavinia snapped, but I'm not fool enough to say it loud. She glanced around and Miss Marple bent over a bouquet, her face hidden. The women moved off, their words lingering like smoke. Miss Marple bought a small bunch of flowers, her mind racing. Lavinia Price was no mere gossip, she was angry, maybe even scared. And her talk of Blackwood matched Clara's story. Mose had been digging into something big before his death. Dr. Finch's role in it, Kate Grayson's feud with him, were threads Miss Marple needed to pull. She headed toward the village hall, where yesterday's festival meeting had shown her the village's raw nerves. The hall was quiet now, its wooden floor scuffed from last night's crowd. Reverend Wells was there, tidying papers at a table. His thin face looked tired, and his hands shook slightly as he stacked leaflets. Miss Marple approached, her smile warm. Good morning, Reverend. I was at the meeting yesterday. Such a lively group. Clara's told me so much about St. Mary's Hollow. Wells managed a weak smile. Welcome, Miss Marple, is it? We're glad to have visitors, though it's a busy time with the festival. Oh, I can imagine, Miss Marple said, settling into a chair with her knitting. Clara mentioned. Some troubles, though. Those letters and poor Mr. Blackwood's passing. It must weigh on you, tending to the village's spirits. Wells' hands froze and he dropped a paper. Yes, well, it's been difficult. Amos was a good man, but his heart gave out. As for the letters, they're just cruel pranks, I'm sure. His voice was too quick, his eyes darting to the door. Miss Marple's needles clicked, her face gentle but her gaze sharp. Pranks can hurt, can't they? Clara showed me one quite threatening. And Mr. Blackwood's death so sudden? I hear. He was quite vocal before he passed. Wells swallowed, his fingers twisting a pencil. Amos was troubled. talked a lot of nonsense about secrets. It's best forgotten. He stood abruptly. I'm sorry, I've got to prepare for a service. Good day, Miss Marple. He hurried out, leaving Miss Marple alone with her thoughts. The vicar was hiding something, his nerves as clear as day. She tucked her knitting away and examined the hall, her eyes catching a notice board by the door. Among the festival flyers was a small typed note, half hidden. Beware the liars among. You, no signature, just like Clara's letter. Miss Marple slipped it into her pocket, her heart quickening. The letter writer was bold. Leaving their poison in plain sight. Her next stop was the butcher's shop, where Mr. Harold Grayson was behind the counter, his apron stained and his face sour. The shop smelled of raw meat and sawdust, and a few customers lingered, their voices hushed. Miss Marple stepped in, asking for a small cut of beef for Clara's supper. As Grayson wrapped it, she tried her charm. You've a fine shop, Mr. Grayson. I saw you at the meeting yesterday, quite a spirited discussion. Grayson grunted, his eyes hard. Spirited? Aye. Some folks think they're above the rest, like that Finch, signing off on Amos Blackwood's death like it was nothing. I don't trust him. Miss Marple nodded, her face all concern. It's hard when trust breaks. I hear Mr. Blackwood's passing was a shock. Shock. Grayson snorted, slamming a cleaver into the counter. Man was healthy as a horse, then he's gone. Finch says heart, but I say hogwash. Amos was stirring trouble, and someone didn't like it. He leaned closer, his voice a growl. You're Clara's friend, so I'll tell you, watch your step. This village ain't as sweet as it looks. Miss Marple thanked him, her calm unshaken. Grayson's anger was real, but his words held a hint of fear. He knew more than he was saying, and his feud with Finch was no simple grudge. As she left, she noticed Dr. Finch across the street, locking his office door. He glanced at the butcher's shop, his face tight, then hurried away. Miss Marple's mind clicked like her needles. The doctor was avoiding Grayson, and maybe more. Back at the cottage, Clara was in the garden clipping roses. Miss Marple joined her, sharing her morning's haul of gossip. The village is a nest of secrets, she said, her voice low. Lavinia Price thinks Finch is dirty, and Grayson's all but calling him a killer. Reverend Wells is scared stiff, and those letters are everywhere. Someone's playing a nasty game, Clara. Clara Shears paused. What about the watch, Jane? And that letter we got? Miss Marple's eyes gleamed. They're part of it. The watch wasn't stolen from Unit's, a message, or maybe a trophy. And the letter means we're close to something. I found another today, pinned at the hall. Same type, same venom. Clara gasped. Another. Jane, this is dangerous. Dangerous, yes, Miss Marple said, her smile sly. But that's where the fun starts. A villain who's scared makes mistakes, and I'm very good at catching those. They went inside, where Miss Marple spread her clues on the table. The threatening letter, the note from the hall, and her mental list of players, Grayson, Finch, Wells, Lavinia, and the shadow of Amos Blackwood. Tomorrow, she said, I'll visit the church. Blackwood's death is the key, I feel it, and Lavinia Price's got a story to tell. Clara poured tea, her hands steadier now. You're like a bloodhound, Jane, but please, be careful. Miss Marple sipped her tea, her needles clicking as the fire crackled. Careful's my middle name, dear. But whoever's behind this, they've met their match. Outside, St. Mary's Hollow settled into dusk, its lights soft in the mist. The village looked peaceful, but Miss Marple knew it was a lie. Secrets were stirring, and she was ready to pull them into the light. Chapter 3. A Clue in the Churchyard ***. Miss Jane Marple woke to the soft chime of Clara's mantel clock. The cottage still wrapped in the quiet of early morning. The autumn mist hung thick outside, cloaking St. Mary's Hollow in a silvery haze. She dressed quickly, her tweed coat and sturdy shoes as familiar as old friends. Her mind hummed with the clues from yesterday, the venomous letters. Mr. Grayson's feud with Dr. Finch, Reverend Wells' nervous dodge, and Lavinia Price's sharp words about Amos Blackwood's death. The village was a tangled knot, and Miss Marple was determined to tease it apart. Today, she'd start at the church where secrets often hid in plain sight. Over a breakfast of toast and tea, Clara fussed, her eyes heavy with worry. "Jane, you're poking a hornet's nest," she said, buttering her toast with quick, nervous swipes. "Those letters, that note you found, someone's watching us." Miss Marple's smile was calm, her voice steady. "Let them watch, Clara. A watcher's just a coward who's scared of being seen. We're close to something, and the church might hold the next piece." She patted her friend's hand, her knitting bag already tucked under her arm. "Keep the doors locked, and don't fret. I'll be back for lunch." Clara nodded, though. Her face stayed tight. Miss Marple stepped out, the mist cool on her cheeks. The village was waking slowly, a milk cart rattling down the lane and a dog barking in the distance. She walked with purpose, her eyes scanning every detail. A shutter left open, a bicycle propped against a wall, the faint smell of wood smoke. St. Mary's Hollow looked sleepy. But Miss Marple knew Batiered's secrets were wide awake. The church sat at the village's edge, its stone tower peeking through the mist. Ivy clung to its walls, and the graveyard stretched out behind, its headstones tilted like old teeth. Miss Marple pushed open the creaky gate, her shoes crunching on the gravel path. Reverend Wells was there, kneeling by a rosebush with a pair of clippers. His thin face looked pale, and his hands shook as he snipped a wilted bloom. He started when he saw her nearly dropping the clippers. "Good morning, Reverend," Miss Marple said, her voice warm. "What a lovely church. I thought I'd have a look before the service." Wells stood, brushing dirt from his knees. "Marple, isn't it? You're welcome, of course. Just tending the roses." His smile was forced, his eyes darting to the graveyard. Miss Marple nodded, her knitting bag swinging gently. "Roses are such work, aren't they? Clara tells me you've had a hard time lately, with Mr. Blackwood's passing and those nasty letters." Wells' face tightened, and he gripped the clippers too hard. "Yes, a sad business. Amos was troubled, but his heart failed. The letters are just cruel gossip. I pray they stop." His voice was thin, like a thread about to snap. "Of course," Miss Marple said, her tone soft, but her eyes sharp. "Still, sudden deaths do stir talk. I hear Amos had strong words before he went." Wells swallowed, his fingers twitching. "He said a lot of things, none of them clear. Excuse me, I've got to prepare the altar." He turned and hurried into the church, the door banging shut behind him. Miss Marple's lips curved slightly. The vicar was as jumpy as a cat in a storm. She wandered into the graveyard, her eyes scanning the headstones. Most were old, their names worn by time, but one caught her attention. Amos Blackwood's, a plain slab near the back. The earth around it looked fresh, as if someone had been digging. She knelt, her gloved fingers brushing the soil. It was loose, not packed, and her heart quickened. Why would anyone disturb a grave months after a burial? As she poked around, something glinted in the dirt, a small metal button engraved with a tiny crest. It wasn't cheap, the kind you'd find on a good coat, but it didn't match any local styles she'd seen. She slipped it into her pocket, her mind racing. A button in a graveyard wasn't just lostette, was a clue. She stood, brushing her gloves, and made a mental note to check the village's coats. Starting with the men she'd met. The church bell rang, calling folks to the morning tea social, a weekly gathering Clara had mentioned. Miss Marple joined the small crowd trickling into the church hall, her knitting needles out as she took a seat near the back. The room smelled of tea and biscuits, and villagers chatted in low voices. She spotted Lavinia Price at a table, her pinched face set in a scowl as she watched Dr. Finch pour tea. His hands were steady, but his eyes flicked to Lavinia too often. Miss Marple's needles clicked, her face blank but her ears wide open. She approached Lavinia with a cup of tea, her smile disarming. "Miss Price, I'm Jane Marple, Clara Henshaw's friend. May I join you? The village is so charming, but Clara says there's been some trouble." Lavinia's eyes narrowed, but she nodded. "Trouble's putting it mildly. Those letters are poison, and folks like Finch act like nothing's wrong." Her voice was sharp, her fingers twisting a handkerchief. Miss Marple sipped her tea, her tone gentle. "It's awful, isn't it? Clara showed me one quite threatening. And I hear poor Mr. Blackwood's death stirred things up." Lavinia leaned closer, her voice a hiss. "Amos didn't just die, Miss Marple. He was onto something, said the village had a rotten core. Told me himself, right here in this hall. He was going to the vicar with proof. Then he's gone. Finch calls it a heart attack, but I don't buy it." Miss Marple's needles paused, just for a moment. "Proof, you say? It's quite a claim." "It's more than a claim," Lavinia said, her eyes burning. "Amos wasn't crazy. He knew something big, and someone shut him up. You mark my words." She stopped short as a young man approached Tom Carver, the blacksmith's apprentice, his broad shoulders tense and his face flushed. "Lavinia, enough," Tom said, his voice low but firm. "You're stirring trouble you can't handle." His eyes flicked to Miss Marple, and he froze, as if realizing she'd heard. Lavinia bristled. "Don't you tell me what to do, Tom Carver. I'll speak my mind." Tom's jaw tightened, but he backed off, muttering, "Just watch yourself." He turned and left, his boots heavy on the floor. Miss Marple's heart raced, though her face stayed calm. Tom's warning wasn't just concern, it was fear. And his coat, she noticed, was dark wool, the kind that might have a button like the one in her pocket. She filed it away, her mind weaving connections. Lavinia's suspicions, Tom's nerves, and that disturbed grave. She stayed at the social a bit longer, chatting with villagers to blend in. Mrs. Tuttle was there, gossiping about the latest letter, which accused the grocer of watering his milk. The room buzzed with whispers, and Miss Marple caught every word, her knitting a perfect cover. Dr. Finch kept his distance, but his eyes followed Lavinia, and once he glanced at the door where Tom had gone. The village was a chessboard, and Miss Marple was learning the players. Back at the cottage, Clara was setting out lunch, cold ham and bread with a pot of tea. Miss Marple shared her mourning, her voice low. "The churchyard's got secrets. Clara, Amos Blackwood's grave was tampered with, and I found this." She pulled out the button, holding it to the light. "It's not local, and I'd wager it's Tom Carver's. He warned Lavinia to keep quiet, and she's sure Amos was murdered." Clara's eyes widened, her teacup trembling. "Murder? Jane? This is worse than I thought. And that button, could it mean Tom's involved?" "Maybe," Miss Marple said, her eyes narrowing. "Horry's caught in someone else's game. Lavinia says Amos had proof of something big, and Reverend Wells is scared stiff. Said the letters, the grave, your watch shit's all tied together." Clara set her cup down hard. "What's next, then? If Tom's mixed up, he's just a boy." "Boy with secrets," Miss Marple said, her smile sly. "Tomorrow I'll visit Dr. Finch, say, I've got a cough. His office might hold answers. It's Kane and Tamai'll find a way to talk to him. The button's a start, but we need more." Clara shook her head, half in awe. "You're like a hunter, Jane, sniffing out tracks no one else sees." Miss Marple chuckled, her needles clicking as she started a new row. "A hunter needs patience, Clara, and I've got plenty of that." As they ate, Miss Marple's mind worked, sorting the day's haul, the disturbed grave, the button, Lavinia's accusations, Tom's warning, and Wells' panic. Amos Blackwood's death was the heart of it, she was sure. The letters were a weapon, the stolen watch a clue, and the village a stage for a clever villain. She glanced out the window where the mist had thickened, hiding St. Mary's Hollow in a ghostly veil. The village was holding its breath, but Miss Marple was ready to make it talk. Chapter 4. The Doctor's Secret Asterisk. Miss Jane Marple rose with the first light. The cottage quiet except for the faint creak of floorboards. The autumn mist still clung to St. Mary's Hollow, wrapping the village in a soft gray blanket. She dressed us in her tweed coat and sensible shoes, her hat pinned just so. Her mind buzzed with the clues she'd gathered. The threatening letters, Amos Blackwood's disturbed grave, the engraved button, Lavinia Price's accusations, and Tom Carver's nervous warning. The village was a web of secrets, and Dr. Ernest Finch, with his tight lips and quick glances, was a key thread. Today, Miss Marple would visit him, using a fake cough as her ticket into his world at breakfast. Clara set out scones and tea, her face pale from another sleepless night. "Jane, you're sure about seeing Dr. Finch?" she asked, her voice shaky. "Lavinia thinks he's trouble, and that button. What if Tom's tied to him?" Miss Marple spread jam on her scone, her smile calm. "If Finch is trouble, Clara, I'll spot it. And Tom's button doesn't mean he's guilty, just caught in something bigger. We need facts, not guesses." Her tone was firm, like a mother soothing a scared child. "Keep that letter we got safe, and don't open the door to strangers. I'll be back by noon." Clara nodded, her hands twisting her apron. Miss Marple grabbed her knitting bag, the needles inside a quiet promise of her sharp mind. She stepped out, the mist cool against her face. The village was stirring, a milkman whistling as he made his rounds. A few curtains twitching as eyes followed her. St. Mary's Hollow looked peaceful, but Miss Marple knew it was a mass danger. Hid in its quiet corners, Dr. Finch's office was a small brick building near the village green. Its sign reading surgery opened 9 to 12. Miss Marple arrived just as the clock struck 9. Her cough ready a soft, convincing hack she'd practiced. The waiting room was empty, smelling of antiseptic and old books. A young nurse, Miss Betty Lane, greeted her with a shy smile. "Morning, ma'am. The doctor's just starting. What's the trouble?" Miss Marple coughed delicately, her face a picture of mild distress. "Just a tickle in my throat, dear. Nothing serious, but I'd like Dr. Finch to check." Betty nodded, jotting her name. "He'll see you soon. Have a seat." She disappeared behind a curtain, leaving Miss Marple alone. The room was tidy, but cluttered medical journals on a table, a faded map of the village on the wall, and a locked cabinet in the corner. Miss Marple's eyes lingered on the cabinet, her mind noting its heavy padlock. What did Finch keep so safe? She settled into a chair, her knitting needles clicking as she started a pale green scarf. The rhythm hid her racing thoughts. Yesterday's churchyard "Find the Button" by Blackwood's grave pointed to Tom Carver. But Lavinia's words about Finch and Amos's death were louder in her head. The doctor had signed off on a heart attack, but Lavinia called it a lie. Miss Marple needed to see Finch up close, catch the cracks in his calm. The curtain parted and Dr. Finch appeared, his thin frame stiff in a white coat. His face was polite but guarded, his eyes flicking to her knitting. "Miss Marple, Betty says you've a cough. Come in, please." His voice was smooth, but Miss Marple caught the strain, like a man bracing for a storm. She followed him into the exam room, a cramped space with a desk, a chair, and shelves of bottles. A ledger sat open on the desk, its pages filled with neat handwriting. Miss Marple's eyes flicked to it, catching a column labeled "Payments" before Finch closed it with a quick hand. She coughed again, settling into the chair. "It's just a bother, doctor," she said, her voice weak. "Started a few days ago. Clara thought I should see you." Finch nodded, pulling out a stethoscope. "Let's have a listen." He checked. Her breathing, his movements precise, but his eyes distant. Miss Marple watched him closely, noting the sweat on his brow despite the cool room. He was nervous, and not just about her cough dot. As he scribbled a note, she steered the conversation. "You've a busy job, doctor, tending the whole village. Clara mentioned poor Mr. Blackwood's passing. Such a shock, I hear." Finch's pen paused, his jaw tightening. Yes, a sad case. His heart gave out. It happens, especially with older folks. His voice was flat, like he'd rehearsed it. Miss Marple nodded, her face all sympathy. Of course, though Clara says he was quite lively before. Some folks wonder, don't they? Especially with those nasty letters going around. Finch's eyes snapped to hers, then away. Gossip's a poison, Miss Marple. The letters are nonsense. And Amos's death was natural. I've no time for rumors. He stood, his hands shoving the ledger into a drawer. The lock clicked shut, but not before Miss Marple saw another page, a list of names. Some crossed out. She coughed again, rising slowly. You're right, doctor. Rumors do no good. Thank you for your time. He prescribed a tonic, his voice clipped, and ushered her out. Miss Marple left with a polite smile, but her heart raced. The ledger, the locked drawer, Finch's quick defense, it all screamed secrets. And those names? It might be Blackwood's. Outside, the mist was lifting, the village green bustling with market stalls. Miss Marple paused by a bench, her knitting out as she sorted her thoughts. Finch was hiding something, maybe tied to Blackwood's death. The ledger held clues, payments, names, a pattern she'd yet to crack. She needed to talk to Tom Carver next. His button in the churchyard and his warning to Lavinia made him a puzzle piece. Willing or not, her next stop was the blacksmith's forge, where Tom worked under Mr. Silas Reed. The forge was a squat building by the river, its chimney puffing smoke. Miss Marple approached, her cough gone, now asking about a garden gate for Clara. The forge was hot, the air thick with coal dust. Silas, a burly man with a gray beard, was hammering a horseshoe, but Tom was in the corner, polishing a tool. His broad face was tense, his eyes flicking to her. Good morning, Mr. Reed, Miss Marple said, her voice bright. Clara needs a new gate. Might you help? Silas wiped his brow, nodding. We can fix that. Tom, show the lady some designs. He turned back to his work, leaving Miss Marple with Tom. She smiled, her eyes kind but piercing. You're Tom Carver, aren't you? I saw you at the church social. Such a lively village, though Clara says it's had troubles. Tom's hands shook, the tool slipping. Troubles? Aye. Letters and such. Don't know much about it. His voice was gruff, but his eyes darted like a trapped animal. Miss Marple nodded, her knitting bag at her side. It's hard when folks are scared. I heard you speak to Miss Price yesterday. You seemed worried for her. Tom's face reddened, his hands clenching. Lavinia talks too much. She'd get herself in a mess. I just told her to be careful. He glanced at a jacket on a hookah, dark wool one, missing a button. Miss Marple's heart skipped, but she kept her face soft. Of course, she said. It's kind to look out for folks. Clara's worried too, with her watch gone and those letters. Even Mr. Blackwood's death has folks talking. Tom's eyes widened, his voice low. Blackwood, he was my ma's boss. She cleaned for him. He was odd, always muttering about secrets. Then he's dead. Don't know more than that. He turned away, grabbing another tool. Miss Marple thanked him, her mind racing. Tom's jacket matched the button, and his mother's tie to Blackwood was new. He was scared, maybe coerced. As she left, she saw Mr. Grayson across the street, watching the forge with hard eyes. He didn't see her, but his stare was venom. The butcher was circling, and Miss Marple meant to find out why. Back at the cottage, Clara was knitting by the fire, her face tight. Miss Marple shared her morning, keeping her voice low. Finch is hiding something, Clara. His ledger's got names and payments. Maybe Blackwood's, and Tom's button was in the churchyard. He's scared, tied to Blackwood through his mother. Grayson's watching him, too. Clara's needles stopped, her eyes wide. Shane, this is dangerous. If Finch is lying about Amos and Tom's mixed up, what's next? Miss Marple's eyes gleamed, her smile sly. Next, we watch. Finch's drawer, Tom's fear, Grayson's anger, they're all threads. I'll find where they meet. And your watch, Clara, it's part of this. A thief doesn't stop at one prize. Clara poured tea, her hands steadier. You're like a detective, Jane, seeing what no one else does. Miss Marple chuckled, her needles clicking. Just an old lady with a knack for puzzles, dear. But this puzzle's got a villain, and I'm on their trail. As dusk fell, St. Mary's Hollow glowed softly, its lights cutting through the mist. The village seemed calm, but Miss Marple knew it was a lie. Secrets were piling up, and she was ready to dig them out one stitch at a time, the air heavy with the scent of wet earth. The mist of St. Mary's Hollow had thickened overnight, cloaking the village in a damp, gray shroud. She dressed in her tweed coat and sturdy shoes, her hat pinned neatly against the drizzle. Her mind churned with yesterday's clues. Dr. Finch's locked ledger, the button from Amos Blackwood's grave, Tom Carver's nervous warning to Lavinia Price, and Mr. Grayson's menacing stare at the forge. The village was a puzzle with sharp edges, and Tom the blacksmith's apprentice was a piece she needed to place. Clara set out boiled eggs and toast, her hands trembling as she poured tea. "Jane, you're sure about Tom?" she asked, her voice low. "He's just a lad. But that button? And if he's tied to Blackwood's death, it's dangerous." Miss Marple cracked her egg, her smile calm but firm. "Tom's young, Clara, but fear makes folks act old. The button puts him at the grave, but it doesn't mean he's guilty. Someone's pulling strings, and I aim to find who." Her tone was steady, like a teacher calming a worried child. "Keep that letter we got hidden, and don't let anyone in. I'll be back for supper." Clara nodded, her eyes still anxious. Miss Marple grabbed her knitting bag, the needles inside a quiet shield for her sharp thoughts. She stepped out, the rain tapping her umbrella as she walked. The village was hushed, its cobblestone lanes slick and empty save for a stray cat darting under a fence. St. Mary's Hollow looked like a painting, all soft edges and muted colors. But Miss Marple saw the truth. Every window hid a secret, every glance held a lie. Her destination was the blacksmith's forge, where Tom Carver worked under Mr. Silas Reed. The forge sat by the river, its chimney puffing smoke despite the rain. Miss Marple had her excuse ready. Clara needed a new latch for her gate. It's a small job to get her talking to Tom. The forge door was open, the air inside hot and thick with the smell of coal and iron. Silas was at the anvil, hammering a glowing rod, his gray beard damp with sweat. Tom was in the corner, sorting tools, his broad shoulders hunched and his face pale. Miss Marple stepped in, shaking her umbrella. "Good morning, Mr. Reed," she called, her voice bright. "Clara's gate needs a new latch. Might you have time for it?" Silas paused, wiping his hands on his apron. We can manage that." "Tom, take care of the lady." He turned back to his work, the hammer ringing out. Tom glanced up, his eyes wary as he approached. "What kind of latch, ma'am?" His voice was gruff, his hands fidgeting with a rag. Miss Marple noticed the jacket on a hook behind him, dark wool, missing a button, just as she'd seen yesterday. Her heart quickened, but her face stayed soft. "Oh, something simple," she said, her smile warm. "Clara's gate swings loose in the wind. You're Tom Carver, aren't you? I saw you at the church social. Such a busy village, though, Clara. Says it's had its troubles." Tom's hands stilled, his eyes flicking to the door. "Troubles? Aye. Folks talk too much." He grabbed a sketchbook, flipping to a page of latch designs. But his fingers shook. Miss Marple nodded, her knitting bag at her side. "It's hard when trust breaks. Clara's upset about her watch, and those letters don't help. I heard you speak to Miss Price at the socials. Sounded like you were looking out for her." Tom's face reddened, his jaw tight. "Lavinia's got a big mouth. She'll get hurt if she keeps flapping it. I just told her to watch out," he scribbled. "A latch design," his pencils snapping mid-stroke. He cursed under his breath. Grabbing another dot, Miss Marple's eyes softened, though her mind was sharp. "It's kind to care, Tom. Lavinia mentioned Mr. Blackwood said he knew something big before he died. Clara says your mother worked for him. That must have been hard, losing him." Tom's head snapped up, his eyes wide with fear. Ma, clean for him. He was. Strange, always muttering about secrets. Paid her well, though. When he died, it hit her hard. Don't know nothing. Else? His voice cracked, and he turned to a shelf. Pretending to sort bolts, Miss Marple watched him closely, noting the sweat on his neck. The button in her pocket felt heavy. She was sure it was his, but his fear wasn't that of a killer. He was. Caught, maybe forced into something? She glanced at the jacket again, its empty buttonhole a silent shout. It's sad when folks pass sudden, she said gently. Clara says some don't think it was natural. Tom spun around, his voice low. Don't go poking there, ma'am. It's dangerous. Blackwood's gone, and stirring it up won't. Help. His eyes darted to Silas, who was still hammering, then back to her. I'll get that latch done. Come back tomorrow. Miss Marple nodded, her smile unchanged. Thank you, Tom. I'll tell Clara. As she turned to leave, she saw Mr. Grayson outside, leaning against a lamppost across the street. His eyes were fixed on the forge, his face hard as stone. He didn't notice her, but his presence was no coincidence. Miss Marple filed it away, her mind weaving connections. Grayson's feud with Finch, Tom's fear, and the button at the grave. Her next stop was the village shop, a cramped place run by Mr. and Mrs. Gibbs. She needed thread for her knitting, but really she wanted gossip. The shop was busy, villagers chatting over baskets of bread and jars of jam. Mrs. Gibbs, a wiry woman with quick eyes, was behind the counter, weighing apples. Miss Marple approached, asking for blue thread while listening to the buzz around. Mrs. Gibbs handed her the thread, her voice low. Heard you're staying with Clara, Miss Marple? Shame about her watch? And those letters another came today, accusing the vicar of hiding money. Village is a mess. Miss Marple nodded, her face all concern. It's dreadful, isn't it? Clara's quite shaken. I hear Mr. Blackwood's death started a lot of talk. Mrs. Gibbs leaned closer, her eyes gleaming. Oh, Amos was odd, always ranting about a village plot. Dr. Finch said heart attack, but some say poison. Young Tom's ma worked for him, you know. She's been poorly since he died. Miss Marple's heart skipped, but she kept her voice soft. Poor woman. It's hard on Tom, I expect. Mrs. Gibbs said. He's a good lad, but jumpy lately. Seen him with Grayson, too, which is odd. That man's got a temper. She turned to another customer, leaving Miss Marple with gold. Back in the rain, Miss Marple walked slowly, her umbrella shielding her thoughts. Tom's mother, Blackwood's death, Grayson's shadowette was all linked. The button placed Tom at the grave, but his fear screamed pawn, not mastermind. Grayson's interest in the forge was troubling, and Finch's ledger loomed large. She needed to see that book, but first she'd try Lavinia again. The spinster's anger might spill more clues. She found Lavinia at the village green, feeding ducks by the pond. The rain had eased and the mist was thinning, revealing the village's soft outlines. Miss Marple approached, her smile warm. Price. What a nice spot. May I join you? Clara's told me so much about the village. Lavinia's face tightened. But she nodded. Sit, if you like. It's not the village it was, though. It's too many lies. Her hands tore bread into bits, tossing them to the ducks. Miss Marple settled on the bench, her knitting out. Clara's upset about her watch, and those letters. I saw you at the social. Tom seemed worried for you, Lavinia snorted. Her eyes hard. Tom's a fool, sticking his nose where it don't belong. He's scared, and he should be. This village is rotten, Miss Marple. Amos knew it, and look what happened. Miss Marple's needles clicked, her voice gentle. You said Amos had proof. Did he ever show you? Lavinia hesitated, her hands still. Not show, but he told me. Said he'd found papers, names, deals, money changing hands. Was going to the vicar. Then he's dead. Finch is in it? I'd bet my life. She glanced around, her voice dropping. And Tom's ma, she saw something at Amos's house. That's why she's sick. Miss Marple's heart raced, though her face stayed calm. It's quite a story. Have you told anyone? Not yet, Lavinia said, her eyes narrowing. But I will, when the time's right. She stood abruptly, tossing the last bread. Mind yourself, Miss Marple. This ain't a game. Miss Marple thanked her, her mind spinning. Lavinia's words about Tom's mother and Amos's papers were new, tying the apprentice tighter to the mystery. She needed to confirm the button's origin and dig into Tom's mother's illness. Grayson's presence at the forge was a red flag, and Finch's ledger was still a locked door. Clara's watch, the letters, Blackwood's death, they were all part of a bigger scheme. And Tom was a key. Back at the cottage, Clara was by the fire, mending a shawl. Miss Marple shared her day, keeping her voice low. Tom's scared, Clara. His mother worked for Blackwood, and Lavinia says she saw something. The buttons, his I'm sure now. Grayson's watching him, and Finch's ledgers got secrets. We're close. Clara's eyes widened, her needles still. Jane, if Tom's mother knows something, she's in danger. And Grayson, he's no good. Miss Marple nodded, her smile sly. Danger's where the truth hides, Clara. Tomorrow I'll try Tom's mother, and maybe Finch again. The watch, the letters, the gravets, all one knot, and I'm pulling. The thread. Clara poured tea, her hands steadier. You're fearless, Jane. Like a fox sniffing out a trap. Miss Marple chuckled, her needles clicking. It's just an old lady with a nose for trouble, dear. And this trouble's about to trip. As night fell, St. Mary's Hollow glowed faintly through the mist, its lights like stars in a fog. The village seemed calm, but Miss Marple knew it was a lie. Secrets were unraveling, and she was ready to catch them, one stitch at a time. Chapter 6. The Midnight Meeting *. Miss Jane Marple stirred late that night. The cottage silent except for the faint tick of Clara's mantel clock. Sleep wouldn't come, her mind too busy with the day's clues. Tom Carver's fear, the button. From Amos Blackwood's grave, Lavinia Price's talk of secret papers. And Dr. Finch's locked ledger. St. Mary's Hollow was a nest of lies. And the threatening letters, Clara's stolen watch, and Blackwood's death were threads in a dark web. She slipped on her dressing gown, her sharp eyes drawn to the window overlooking the village green. The mist had thickened, cloaking the village in a ghostly veil, but a flicker of movement caught her attention. Tonight, she sensed, might reveal more than daylight could. She settled by the window, her knitting needles in hand, their soft click, a cover for her racing thoughts. The green was dark, its lampposts casting weak pools of light. Clara slept upstairs, unaware of Miss Marple's vigil. The threatening letter they'd received, keep your guest quiet or she'd regret it, Wade. Heavy a sign someone knew she was digging? Miss Marple wasn't scared. Frightened villain was a sloppy one, and she was ready to catch their mistakes. Around midnight, her patience paid off. 3 figures emerged from the mist, moving toward the church across the green. Their shapes were faint, but Miss Marple's eyes, keen, despite her age, picked out details: Dr. Finch's thin frame, Mr. Grayson's broad shoulders, and Reverend Wells' nervous shuffle. They huddled near the church gate, their voices too low to hear, but their gestures sharp-pointing, waving, arguing. Finch's hands sliced the air, Grayson's fists clenched, and Wells backed up, as if trapped. Miss Marple's needles paused, her heart quickening. This was no friendly chat. It was a meeting of guilty men. She leaned closer to the window, the cold glass fogging under her breath. The men's argument grew heated, Grayson shoving Finch, who stumbled but held his ground. Wells raised his hands like a referee in a fight, and they quieted, glancing around. Miss Marple ducked back, her silhouette hidden by the curtain. The men spoke a moment longer, then split apart, Finch toward his office, Grayson down the lane, and Wells into the church. The green fell silent, the mist swallowing their tracks. Miss Marple sat back, her needles clicking again. This midnight meeting was a gold mine. Finch, Grayson, and Wells were linked, their tension tied to Blackwood's death, or the letters, maybe. Both Clara's watch, stolen from a locked safe, Felt like a piece of their puzzle, a trophy, or a tool. She needed to know what they'd said and why they met in secret. Her plan for tomorrow sharpened. Confront Wells, the weakest link, and revisit the churchyard. The disturbed grave held answers, and she wouldn't wait for daylight to find them. At breakfast, Clara set out porridge and tea, her face pale. "Jane, you look tired," she said, stirring her bowl. "Did you sleep at all?" Miss Marple smiled, her eyes bright, despite the late night. "Enough, Clara, but I saw something. Finch, Grayson, and Wells meeting by the church at midnight. They were arguing, scared, were close to the truth." Her voice was calm, but her words carried weight. Clara's spoon clattered. "Midnight. Jane, that's dangerous. What if they saw you?" "They didn't," Miss Marple said, her tone firm. "But they're rattled, and that's good. A scared man trips, and I'll be there to catch him. Today I'll talk to Wellsie's cracking. And we need to check Blackwood's grave again. Something's buried there, I'm sure." Clara's eyes widened, her hands twisting her napkin. The grave. "In the dark, Jane, this is too much." Miss Marple patted her hand, her smile sly. "Not too much, dear, just enough. Keep the cottage locked and don't touch that letter. It's our ace." She grabbed her knitting bag, the needles a quiet promise of her sharp mind, and stepped into the morning. The rain had stopped, but the mist hung heavy, muffling the village's sounds. St. Mary's Hollow was waking, a baker's cart rattling, a few villagers hurrying through the damp. Miss Marple walked to the church, her umbrella up, her eyes scanning every detail. A shutter ajar, a dog sniffing a gate, the faint smell of coal smoke. The village looked innocent, but she knew its heart was rotten. The church loomed through the mist, its stone walls slick with dew. Miss Marple found Reverend Wells inside, arranging hymnals in the pews. His face was haggard, his hands shaking as he fumbled a book. He started when he saw her, his eyes darting to the door. "Miss Marple," he said, his voice thin, "you're early. No service till noon." Miss Marple smiled, settling into a pew with her knitting. "I like the quiet, Reverend. Clara's told me how hard you work, keeping the village together. Though it's been tough with Blackwood's death and those letters." Wells' face paled, his fingers twisting a hymnal. "Yes, a trying time. Amos, his heart failed. The letters are just cruel pranks. I pray for peace." His words were rehearsed, his eyes avoiding hers. Miss Marple's needles clicked. Her voice, gentle but sharp. "Peace is hard when trust breaks." Clara got a nasty letter threatening her. "And Blackwood, some say he knew too much. I hear he came to you before he died." Wells dropped the hymnal, his hands trembling. Amos was troubled, talking nonsense about secrets. "I told him to rest. Then he was gone. It's nothing more." He bent to pick up the book, his movements jerky. Miss Marple leaned forward, her eyes piercing. "Nonsense or truth?" "I saw you last night, Reverend, with Finch and Grayson. By the church you looked scared. What's going on?" Wells froze, his face white. You saw." "It was nothing, just a talk. We're part of a benevolent society helping the village. Nothing more." His voice cracked, his eyes pleading. Miss Marple's smile didn't waver, but her gaze was steel. "A society that meets at midnight. Reverend's secrets hurt more than they help. If you know something, tell me, for Clara's sake." Wells shook his head, backing away. "I can't. Please, leave it alone." He turned and fled to the vestry, the door slamming shut. Miss Marple sat back, her needles clicking. Wells was breaking his benevolent society a flimsy lie. The midnight meeting tied him to Finch and Grayson, and Blackwood's death was the knot. She needed to see that grave again, but daylight was too risky. Villagers would notice. Tonight she'd go with Clara under cover of darkness. The thought sent a thrill through her. A good mystery was better than any novel. She spent the afternoon in the village, blending in to gather more whispers. At the post office, Mrs. Tuttle was sorting mail, her tongue wagging about a new letter accusing the grocer of cheating. "Typed like the rest," she said, handing Miss Marple stamps. "This village is falling apart." Miss Marple nodded, her mind noting the pattern. The letters targeted everyone, sowing chaos. At the bakery, Mrs. Dodd mentioned Tom Carver looking sick with worry. And Lavinia Price was seen arguing with Finch near the green. The village was a pot boiling over, and Miss Marple was stirring it. Back at the cottage, Clara was baking, the smell of bread calming her nerves. Miss Marple shared her day, keeping her voice low. "Wells is lying, Clara. He met Finch and Grayson last night, and they're scared. His society is a cover. The grave's our next move. Something's hidden there. We'll go tonight." Clara's eyes widened, her hands pausing mid-need. "Tonight, Jane. It's dangerous. What if someone catches us?" Smile was sly. "Then we'll be careful. A lantern, a shovel, and quiet feet. That's all we need." The truth's worth a little risk. She pulled out the button from her pocket, holding it to the light. "Tom's tied to the grave, but he's no mastermind. Someone's using him, and I bet it's Grayson or Finch." Clara shook her head, half in awe. "You're fearless, Jane, like a detective in a story." Miss Marple chuckled, her needles clicking. "Just an old lady with a nose for trouble, dear. And this trouble's about to spill." As evening fell, they prepared. Clara found a small shovel and a lantern, her hands steadying with purpose. Miss Marple tucked the button away, her mind mapping the churchyard. The mist thickened outside, perfect cover for their plan. They ate a quiet supper, the cottage warm against the damp night. Clara's fear was fading, replaced by trust in Miss Marple's calm. At 11, they slipped out, the lantern dimmed to a glow. The village was asleep, its lights faint through the mist. They moved silently, sticking to the shadows, the church looming ahead. Miss Marple's heart raced. Not with fear, but excitement. A mystery was unfolding, and she was at its heart. The graveyard was dark, the headstones ghostly in the mist. They found Blackwood's grave, its earth still loose, a sign someone had been back. Miss Marple knelt, her gloves keeping the dirt off. "Here, Clara," she whispered, pointing to a soft patch. "Dig gently." Clara nodded, her shovel biting into the soil. They worked fast, the lantern casting long shadows, few inches. Down, Clara's shovel hit something hard, a metal box, small but heavy. Miss Marple's eyes gleamed as she lifted it. Its lock rusted but intact. Before they could open it, a noise froze, then a twig snapping nearby. Miss Marple doused the lantern, pulling Clara behind a headstone. Footsteps crunched, slow and deliberate. A figure loomed through the mist. Tom Carver, his face pale, a shovel in hand. He stopped at the grave, staring at the disturbed earth, his breath ragged. Miss Marple stood, her voice soft but firm. "Tom, it's me, Miss Marple." "Clara, what are you doing here?" Tom gasped, dropping the shovel. I didn't mean. I was told to check the grave. Grayson, he said, to make sure it's safe." His voice broke, his eyes wild. Miss Marple stepped closer, her calm unshaken. "Safe from what, Tom? What's in this box?" Tom's shoulders slumped, his voice a whisper. "I don't know. Grayson's. Got me scared. Said if I didn't help, he'd hurt Ma. She's sick, Miss Marple, ever since Blackwood died. I dug here once for him. That's how I lost my button." Miss Marple's heart raced, but her face stayed kind. "You're not alone now, Tom. Tell us everything and we'll help." Before he could answer, more footsteps echoed, heavy and fast. Miss Marple grabbed the box, pulling Clara and Tom into the shadows. The churchyard fell silent, but danger was close. St. Mary's Hollow was watching, and Miss Marple was ready to fight back. Chapter 7. The Grave's Secret Asterisk. Miss Jane Marple crouched in the misty churchyard, her heart steady despite the danger closing in. The night was thick with fog, the air damp and cold, muffling the footsteps that had sent her, Clara, and Tom Carver ducking behind a weathered headstone. In her gloved hands, she clutched the metal box they'd just unearthed from Amos Blackwood's grave, a rusty, locked thing that felt heavy with secrets. Clara's breath was shallow beside her, and Tom, his broad frame trembling, whispered, "It's them. I know it." The village of St. Mary's Hollow was asleep, but its darkest players were awake, and Miss Marple's sharp mind was ready to catch them. Moments ago, Tom had confessed to digging at the grave on Mr. Grayson's orders, his lost button proof of his role. He'd been coerced, scared for his sick mother, who'd worked for Blackwood before his sudden death. The box, Miss Marple was sure held. The key to the village's conspiracy, the threatening letters. Clara's stolen watch and Blackwood's murder disguised as a heart attack. But the approaching footsteps meant time was short. She gripped the box tighter, her knitting bag slung over her shoulder, and signaled Clara and Tom to stay low. The footsteps stopped, and a figure emerged through the mist. Dr. Ernest Finch, his thin frame tense, a shovel in hand. He knelt by the open grave, his breath visible in the cold. "It's gone," he muttered, his voice sharp with panic. He dug frantically, dirt flying, unaware of the eyes watching him. Miss Marple's mind raced. Finch was after the box, proving it held something big, maybe the papers Lavinia Price said Blackwood had found, exposing a village plot. She whispered to Clara, "Stay here. Keep Tom quiet." Clara nodded, her eyes wide but trusting. Miss Marple stood, her small figure cutting through the mist, her voice calm but firm. "Dr. Finch, it's late for gardening, isn't it?" Finch spun, dropping the shovel, his face white. "Miss Marple, I was just checking the grounds. Vandals, you know." Sly was thin, his eyes darting to the grave. Miss Marple stepped closer, the box hidden behind her back. "Vandals don't dig so neatly, Doctor." "Nor do they. Panic when a box goes missing. What's in it?" Her tone was gentle, but her eyes were steel, pinning him like a butterfly. Finch's hands shook, his voice cracking. "You don't understand. It's dangerous. I had to make sure it was safe." He glanced around as if expecting rescuer. "Trouble?" Before Miss Marple could press, Clara gasped softly, and Tom stood, his voice hoarse. "Tell her, Finch. I'm done hiding. Grayson made me dig here, said it was for the village, but it's wrong, all of it." His fists clenched, his fear turning to defiance. Finch's face twisted, his voice a hiss. "Quiet, boy. You'll ruin everything." He lunged for Tom, but Miss Marple stepped between them, her umbrella raised like a sword. "Enough, Doctor. Tell the truth, or the constable will." Finch froze, his shoulders slumping. "It's not what you think," he said, his voice low. "Blackwood, he wasn't just sick. He was poisoned. I signed the heart attack to protect the village. Grayson's the one he's running it all. Get the letters, the thefts, the box seats, his plan." Miss Marple's heart raced, but her face stayed calm. "Poisoned. And this box, what's in it?" Finch hesitated, his eyes wild. "Papers, lists of names, payments. Blackwood found out about Grayson's scheme extorting folks with secrets, using the letters to scare them. I helped cover it up. Grayson said it was for the village's good to buy land, keep us strong. But it's gone too far." Before he could say more, a new sound cut through the mist-heavy boots, fast and angry. Miss Marple turned, her eyes narrowing. Mr. Harold Grayson loomed into view, his butcher's frame hulking, a knife glinting in his hand. "Finch, you fool," he roared. "You led them right to it." Clara stifled a cry, and Tom stepped forward, his voice shaking but firm. "It's over, Grayson. I told them. I won't let you hurt Ma anymore." Grayson's eyes burned, his knife pointed at Tom. "You're dead, boy. And you, old lady meddling's got you in trouble." He lunged, but Miss Marple was ready. With a quick flick, she swung her umbrella, catching his wrist. The knife flew into the dirt, and Tom tackled. Him pinning his arms. Grayson thrashed, cursing, but Tom's strength held. Miss Marple stood tall, her voice icy. "That's enough, Mr. Grayson. The game's up." She nodded to Clara, who pulled a whistle from her pouch, a gift from Miss Marple for emergencies. Clara blew hard, the shrill sound cutting through the night. Lights flickered in nearby cottages, and distant shouts answered. The village was waking. Finch, seeing his chance, tried to bolt. But Miss Marple's umbrella tripped him, sending him sprawling. "Stay put, Doctor," she said, her tone sharp. "You've got explaining to do." Moments later, the village. Constable, Mr. Dobbs, arrived, his lantern swinging. With him was Silas Reed, the blacksmith, roused by the whistle. Dobbs, a burly man with a no-nonsense face, took in the scene. Grayson pinned. Finch in the dirt, and Miss Marple holding a rusty box. "What's all this, then?" Kay demanded. Miss Marple stepped forward, her voice clear. "Constable, these men are part of a conspiracy. Dr. Finch admits to covering up Amos Blackwood's murder poison. It's not a heart attack, Mr. Grayson's. Behind it, extorting villagers with letters and thefts like Clara's watch. This box holds proof." Tom here was forced to help but came clean. Dobbs' eyes widened, but he nodded, cuffing Grayson and Finch. "We'll sort this at the station. You lot, come with me." Silas helped Tom stand, his gruff voice soft. "You did right, lad." Miss Marple handed the box to Dobbs, her smile sly. "Mind that, Constable? It's the heart of it all." She turned to Clara, who was shaking but steady. "Well done, dear. A whistle's worth a dozen shouts." Back at the cottage, dawn was breaking, the mist thinning to reveal St. Mary's Hollow's soft outlines. Clara made tea, her hands steadier now, while Miss Marple sat by the fire, her knitting needles clicking. Tom, released by Dobbs to stay with Silas, had promised to talk more later. The box was with the constable. But Miss Marple had glimpsed its contents as they'd pried it open in the churchyard. Papers, lists of names, Finch, Grayson, Wells, and others, and records of payments, just as Finch said. Clara set a cup before her, her voice awed. "Jane, you were like a lion out there. Grayson with a knife, Finch running you stopped them both." Miss Marple chuckled, her eyes twinkling. "It's an old lady's got tricks, Clara. But it's not over. Wells is still out there, and the letters haven't stopped. The box tells part of the story, but there's more." Clara's eyes widened. "More? Jane, you got them arrested?" Miss Marple sipped her tea, her smile sly. "Grayson's the head, but not the only one. Wells Benevolent Society is a lie, and someone's still typing those letters. We've cut the snake's head, but its tail's twitching." Clara shook her head, half in awe. "You're unstoppable, Jane. What's next?" Miss Marple's needles clicked, her mind already moving. "We talked to Tom's mother. She saw something at Blackwood's, and Wells' heel, cracked now, with Finch and Grayson gone. Clara's watch is still out there, too. The puzzle's half solved, but I like a challenge." As the village woke, Miss Marple looked out the window. The green glowing in the early light. St. Mary's Hollow seemed peaceful, but she knew better. Secrets were spilling, and she was ready to sweep them up, one stitch at a time. Chapter 8. The Confrontation. The dawn light crept through the cottage windows, painting St. Mary's Hollow in soft golds as Miss Jane Marple sat by the fire, her knitting needles clicking steadily. The night's chaos in the churchyard lingered. In her mind, Dr. Finch's confession of Amos Blackwood's poisoning, Mr. Grayson's knife-wielding rage, and the metal box of papers exposing their extortion scheme. Clara's tea steamed on the table, but Miss Marple's thoughts were sharp, weaving together the threads of the village's conspiracy. With Grayson and Finch in the constable's custody, the net was tightening. But Reverend Wells was still free, and Clara's stolen watch remained missing. The anonymous letters hadn't stopped either, and Miss Marple knew the village's secrets weren't fully spilled. Today, she'd push harder, starting with Wells and Tom Carver's mother, who might hold the final clues. Clara bustled in. her face a mix of awe and worry as she set out scones and jam. "Jane, I still can't believe it," she said, her voice low. "You faced Grayson's knife like it was nothing. But Wells is still out there, and those letters. What if they come for us again?" Miss Marple spread jam on a scone, her smile calm but firm. "They might try, Clara, but we've got the upper hand. Grayson's caught, Finch is talking, and the box proves their game. Wells is scared, and scared men break easy. We'll get your watch back and stop those letters." Her tone was steady, like a teacher soothing a nervous child. "Keep the cottage locked, and if Tom comes by, keep him talking. His mother's key to this." Clara nodded, her hands steadier now. Miss Marple grabbed her knitting bag, the needles a quiet shield for her sharp mind, and stepped into the morning. The mist had lifted, leaving the village crisp and clear, its stone cottages glowing in the early sun. St. Mary's Hollow looked peaceful. But Miss Marple saw the cracks, curtains twitching, villagers whispering as they passed, their eyes darting toward the church. The news of last night's arrests was spreading. Kay and the village was on edge. Her first stop was the church, where Reverend Wells would be preparing for the day's service. The stone tower stood tall, its ivy glistening with dew. Miss Marple pushed open the gate, her shoes crunching on the gravel path. Inside, the church was quiet, the air cool and heavy with the smell of wax and old wood. Wells was at the altar, arranging candles, his thin hands shaking so badly he knocked one over. He froze when he saw her, his face pale as chalk. "Miss Marple," he stammered, his voice thin. I heard about last night. Terrible business. I'm just preparing the service." His eyes darted to the door as if he might bolt. Miss Marple settled into a pew, her knitting needles out, their soft click filling the silence. "Terrible. Yes, Reverend." Grayson and Finch caught Blackwood's murder exposed. "Quite a night. You must be shaken, being part of their benevolent society." Her voice was gentle, but her eyes were sharp, pinning him like a moth. Wells' hands gripped the altar cloth, his knuckles white. "I told you, it was just a group to help the village. Nothing more. I didn't know about murder." His voice cracked, his eyes pleading. Miss Marple's needles paused, her gaze unwavering. "Didn't know or didn't want to. Saw you with them at midnight, arguing. Finch says Grayson ran the extortion, using letters to scare folks." "You knew, Reverend? And Blackwood came to you with proof before he died. What did you do with it?" Kay sank onto a pew, his face crumpling. I was scared, Miss Marple. Amos showed me papers, names, payments, a plan to squeeze money from rich folks. He said Grayson was behind it, with Finch helping. I told him to go to the constable, but he wanted to confront them first. Then he was dead, and Grayson said if I talked, I'd be next." His voice broke, tears welling. Miss Marple nodded, her face soft but her mind racing. "So you stayed quiet? Even when Clara's watch was stolen, even when letters tore the village apart. Where's the watch, Reverend? And who's still typing those letters?" Wells shook his head, his hands twisting. "I don't know about the watch. Grayson took it. I think to sell for the land deal. The letters. Swear? I don't know. Grayson said they'd stop, but they didn't. Someone else must be sending them." He looked up, his eyes desperate. "I'll tell the constable everything, I promise. Just keep me safe." Miss Marple's smile was sly. "The truth keeps you safer than silence, Reverend. Go to Constable Dobbs now. Tell him what you told me. I'll be watching." She stood, her knitting tucked away, and left Wells trembling. In the pew. He was broken, his confession a crack in the conspiracy's wall. But the watch and the letters were still loose ends. And Miss Marple wasn't done. Her next stop was Tom Carver's home. It's a small cottage near the forge where his mother, Mrs. Ellen Carver, lived. Lavinia Price had said Ellen saw something at Blackwood's before his death, and her illness might be more than grief. The cottage was tidy but worn, its garden overgrown. Miss Marple knocked her umbrella at her side, her cough ready as an excuse if needed. Tom answered, his broad face pale, his eyes red from lack of sleep. "Miss Marple," he said, his voice low. "Ma's not well. What do you want?" His tone was wary, but his fear was plain. Miss Marple smiled, her voice gentle. "It's just a quick word, Tom. Clara's worried about you, and I heard your mother's poorly. I thought I'd offer some tea or soup. May I see her?" Tom hesitated, then nodded, stepping aside. "She's in bed. Don't upset her, please." He led her to a small bedroom where Ellen lay under a quilt, her face thin and gray. Her eyes fluttered open, confused but sharp. "Mrs. Carver," Miss Marple said, settling by the bed with her knitting. "I'm Jane Marple, Clara's friend. I'm sorry you're unwell. Tom says you worked for Mr. Blackwood. It must have been hard losing him." Ellen's hands twitched, her voice weak. "Amos, good man, but troubled. Always talking about secrets. Saw things, papers, names. He caught me looking, said to keep quiet. Then he was gone, and I got sick." Her eyes filled with tears, her breath ragged. Miss Marple leaned closer, her voice soft. "What did you see, Ellen? Safe to tell me." "Grayson's caught and Finch is talking." Ellen's eyes widened, her voice a whisper. "A list. Grayson, Finch, others. Money for silence. Amos said they were bleeding the village dry. I told Tom to stay clear, but Grayson scared him. After Amos died, I found a vial in his kitchen, empty, smelled wrong. Then I got weak, like poison." She coughed, her body shaking. Miss Marple's heart raced, but her face stayed calm. "You're brave, Ellen. That vial do you still have it?" Ellen shook her head. "Gone. Grayson took it. Said he'd hurt Tom if I talked." Tom, standing by the door, gasped, his fists clenchying. Ms. Marple patted Ellen's hand. "Rest now. We'll fix this." She turned to Tom, her voice firm. "You did right last night, Tom. Take care of her and tell Constable Dobbs about that vial. It's proof." Tom nodded, his eyes wet. "I'm sorry, Miss Marple. I was scared for Ma. I'll talk to Dobbs." Miss Marple left the cottage, her mind spinning. Ellen's story confirmed Finch's confession. Blackwood was poisoned, and Grayson was the mastermind. The vial was gone, but Ellen's testimony was gold. The watch, Miss Marple guessed, was with Grayson's loot, likely hidden in his shop. The letters, though, were a puzzle. Wells claimed ignorance, but someone was still typing them. Keeping the village on edge, she headed to the butcher's shop, hoping to catch a clue before Grayson's arrest spread. The shop was closed, a sign reading "out of town," but Miss Marple wasn't fooled. She slipped around back, her umbrella tapping the cobblestones. The rear door was locked, but a window was cracked open, just enough for her sharp eyes. Inside, she saw a cluttered storeroom meet hooks, crates, and a locked chest in the corner. Her heart skipped. The watch could be there before she could. "Investigate." A voice startled her. "Miss Marple, what are you doing?" It was Lavinia Price, her pinched face suspicious as she stood in the alley. Miss Marple turned, her smile disarming. "Just checking the shop, Miss Price. Clara's watch might be here, with Grayson's things. You've been a help speaking out about Blackwood." Lavinia's eyes narrowed, but she softened. I hope you're right. Grayson's a snake, and Finch is no better. But be careful, someone's still out there sending those letters." She turned and left, her shawl flapping in the breeze. Miss Marple nodded, her mind noting Lavinia's warning. Back at the cottage, Clara was knitting, her face brighter. Miss Marple shared her mourning, keeping her voice low. Wells confessed. Clara, he knew about the extortion, but stayed quiet. Ellen Carver saw a poison vial at Blackwood's, and Grayson's got your watch, I'd bet, in his shop. The letters are still a mystery, but we're close. Clara's eyes widened, her needles still. "Jane, you're unraveling it all. But the letters, who's left to send them?" Miss Marple's smile was sly. "Someone clever, Clara. Someone. Watching. Waiting. Tomorrow, we'll search Grayson's shop with Dobbs' help, and I'll talk to Lavinia again. She knows more than she says. Clara poured tea, her hands steady now. You're like a bloodhound, Jane, sniffing out every trail. Miss Marple chuckled, her needles clicking. Just an old lady with a knack for puzzles, dear. And this puzzle's almost solved. As dusk fell, St. Mary's Hollow glowed softly, its lights cutting through the fading mist. The village seemed calm, but Miss Marple knew it was a lie. The truth was rising, and she was ready to grab it one stitch at a time. Chapter 9. The village healed *. The morning sun broke through the last wisps of mist, bathing St. Mary's Hollow in a golden glow. Miss Jane Marple sat by Clara's cottage window, her knitting needles clicking as she sipped tea. The events of the churchyard confrontation lingered. Dr. Finch's confession of Amos Blackwood's poisoning, Mr. Grayson's arrest, and the box of papers exposing their extortion scheme. Reverend Wells had crumbled, admitting his silence in the face of Grayson's threats. And Ellen Carver's story of a poisoned vial tied the threads together. Clara's stolen watch was still missing, and the anonymous letters hadn't stopped. But Miss Marple's sharp mind was closing in. Today, she'd tie up the loose ends, restore Clara's watch, and unmask the letter writer. Bringing peace to the village, Clara bustled in, setting out toast and marmalade, her face lighter than it had been in days. "Jane, the village is buzzing," she said, her voice warm. Grayson and Finch locked up, Wells talking to the constables like a weight's lifted. "But those letters and my watch, will we ever get them back?" Miss Marple spread marmalade, her smile calm but sly. "We will, Clara. The watch is with Grayson's loot, I'm sure. And the letters are from someone left behind, someone clever, but scared. Today we'll search Grayson's shop and talk to Lavinia Price. She's got one last secret." Her tone was steady, like a mother reassuring a child. "Keep the cottage ready for guests. Tom might stop by and we'll need tea." Clara nodded, her hands steady now. Miss Marple grabbed her knitting bag, the needles a quiet shield for her racing thoughts, and stepped into the morning. St. Mary's Hollow sparkled, its stone cottages and flower boxes bright in the sun. Villagers moved with lighter steps, there. Whispers now of relief rather than fear. But Miss Marple saw the shadows, eyes still darted, and the post office was busy, hinting at another letter. The village was healing but not whole. Her first stop was the constable's office, the small building near the village green. Constable Dobbs was there, sorting papers from the metal box, his burly frame hunched over a desk. He looked up as Miss Marple entered, his face a mix of respect and exhaustion. "Miss Marple, you've turned this village upside down," he said, a grin tugging his lips. "Grayson singing, Finch's spilling, and Wells came in this morning, near tears. That box list of names, payments, even Clara's watch mentioned. You've done us a service." Miss Marple smiled, settling into a chair with her knitting. "Just helping a friend, Constable." "Have you searched Grayson's shop yet? The watch is there, I'd wager, with other stolen goods." Dobbs nodded. Grabbing his hat, was planning to this morning. "Care to join? You have a nose for this?" His tone was half joking, but his eyes were serious. Miss Marple's needles clicked, her eyes twinkling. "I wouldn't miss it." "And the letters, Seenie. New ones." Dobbs' face darkened. One came today accusing Mrs. Tuttle of stealing stamps. It's typed like the rest. Grayson swears it's not him, and Finch says the same. Someone's still stirring trouble." Miss Marple nodded, her mind filing the clue. "We'll find them, Constable. Let's start with the shop." She stood, her small frame brimming with purpose, and followed Dobbs to the butcher's. Grayson's shop was locked, its windows dark, but Dobbs had a key from the arrest. The air inside was thick with the smell of meat and sawdust, the counter bare except for a rusty scale. Miss Marple's eyes swept the room, landing on the storeroom door she'd glimpsed yesterday. There, she said, pointing at chest. In the back. Dobbs pushed open the door, revealing a cluttered space, crates, hooks, and a locked wooden chest in the corner. He pried it open with a crowbar, the lid creaking to reveal a trove of stolen goods rings, brooches, a silver candlestick, and nestled in a velvet pouch, Clara's gold pocket watch. Miss Marple's heart lifted, but she kept her face calm. "That's it," she said, "Clara's watch. The rest must belong to other villagers." Dobbs whistled, bagging the items. "Grayson's been busy. This'll make folks happy." "But the letters, any ideas, Miss Marple?" Her smile was sly. "One or two, Constable. Let's get these back to their owners. Then I'll have a word with Miss Price. She's been loud about Blackwood, but quiet about herself." They returned to the constable's office, where Dobbs logged the items. Miss Marple took Clara's watch, promising to deliver it. Her next stop was the village green, where Lavinia Price was often seen feeding ducks. The pond sparkled in the sun, and Lavinia was there, her bony hands tossing bread, her face set in its usual scowl. Miss Marple approached, her smile warm. "Miss Price, what a lovely day. May I join you?" Clara's thrilled her watch is found. Lavinia's eyes widened, her hands stilling. "Found? Where?" Miss Marple settled on the bench, her knitting. "Out Grayson's shop, with other stolen goods. Key and Finch are done, and Wells is talking." "But the letters keep coming. You've been bold about Blackwood's murder. Know anything about who's still typing?" Lavinia's face tightened, her voice sharp. "I told you what I know. Grayson ran it, Finch helped, and Amos was killed for snooping. The letters. Someone's picking up where Grayson left off." "Maybe Wellsy's weak." Her eyes darted away too quick. Miss Marple's needles clicked, her gaze piercing. "Maybe, but you've got sharp eyes, Lavinia. You saw Amos's papers, heard Ellen Carver's fears. If you know who's writing, tell me." For the village, Lavinia stood, her shawl slipping. "Said enough, leave me be." She hurried, off her steps fast, but Miss Marple saw the fear in her gait. Lavinia wasn't just angry, she was hiding something. The letters, Miss Marple suspected, were her doing. It's a desperate bid to keep the village stirred after Grayson's fall. Back at the cottage, Clara gasped when Miss Marple handed her the watch, its gold face gleaming. "Jane, you did it," she cried, clutching it to her chest. "Henry's watch, oh, I thought it was gone forever." Miss Marple smiled, her eyes soft. "Promise. Kept, Clara, but the letters are still out there. Think Lavinia's behind them, trying to finish what Grayson started. She's scared, and scared folks make mistakes." Clara's eyes widened, her voice low. "Lavinia, but why?" Miss Marple's needles clicked, her mind sharp. Power, maybe. Or fear of being found out. She knew too much about Amos's papers, and her anger's too sharp. "We'll watch her. But first, we need the village to heal." That afternoon, Miss Marple suggested a meeting at the village hall, with Dobbs' blessing. Villagers gathered, their faces a mix of relief and curiosity. Dobbs stood at the front, holding the box of stolen goods, while Miss Marple sat near Clara, her knitting a quiet anchor. The constable explained Grayson's scheme, extorting wealthy villagers with secrets, using letters to scare them, and stealing treasures like Clara's watch to fund a land deal. Finch had forged Blackwood's death certificate to hide the poisoning, and Wells had stayed silent out of fear. The box's papers named every victim, and the stolen goods were ready to be returned. Miss Marple stood, her small frame commanding the room. "St. Mary's Hollow is yours again," she said, her voice clear. "Grayson and Finch are gone, and Wells is making amends. But trust takes time. Those letters were meant to break you, but you're stronger than that. If anyone knows who's still sending them, speak now. Let's end this." The room was silent, but Lavinia Price in the back shifted uncomfortably. Miss Marple's eyes locked on her, and Lavinia looked away, her face pale. No one spoke, but the seed was planted. As villagers claimed their stolen goods rings, watches, heirlooms, the mood lifted. Clara hugged her watch, tears in her eyes, and Tom Carver, there with Silas, nodded to Miss Marple, his face grateful. After the meeting, Lavinia approached, her voice low. I'm sorry, Miss Marple. I was scared. After Amos died, sent a few letters to keep folks looking at Grayson. Thought it'd help. Her hands twisted, her eyes wet. Miss Marple nodded, her face kind but firm. Fear makes fools. Of us, Lavinia, tell Dobbs everything. Stop the letters, and you'll heal with the village. Lavinia nodded, her shoulders sagging, and left to find the constable. Back at the cottage, Clara poured tea, her face glowing. Jane, you've saved us. The watch, the truth fits, more than I hoped. Miss Marple's smile was sly. Village is like a quilt. Clara mend the tears, and it's whole again. Lavinia's confessed. The watch is back, and the letters will stop. We've done well. Clara laughed, her hands steady. You're a miracle, Jane. What's next? Miss Marple's needles clicked, her eyes twinkling. It's a quiet day, dear. Then I'm off to the next puzzle. Trouble always finds me. As evening fell, St. Mary's Hollow settled into peace, its lights soft in the clear night. The village was healing, and Miss Marple, with her knitting and her sharp mind, had stitched it back together, one careful thread at a time. Chapter 10. The Departure *. The morning sun spilled over St. Mary's Hollow, casting a warm glow on the stone cottages and winding lanes. Miss Jane Marple sat at Clara's kitchen table, her knitting needles clicking as she sipped tea, the faint scent of lavender drifting from a vase nearby. The village was healing after the whirlwind of the past days. Mr. Grayson and Dr. Finch were in custody for Amos Blackwood's murder and their extortion scheme. Reverend Wells had confessed his silence. Lavinia Price had admitted to sending. The last anonymous letters and Clara's gold watch gleamed on the mantel, restored from Grayson's stolen hoard. The conspiracy was unraveled, but Miss Marple's sharp mind lingered on the village's fragile peace. Today was her last day, and she meant to leave St. Mary's Hollow stronger than she'd found it. Clara bustled in, her face brighter than it had been in weeks, setting out fresh scones and jam. Jane, I can't believe you're leaving tomorrow, she said, her voice warm but tinged with sadness. You've turned this village around, Grayson gone. My watch back, even Lavinia owning up. It's like a miracle. Miss Marple spread jam on a scone, her smile calm but sly. No miracle, Clara, just a good look at the pieces. The village was strong underneath. It just needed a nudge. Keep an eye on Lavinia, though. She's sorry, but habits die hard. Her tone was steady, like a teacher guiding a favorite student. And Tom, check on him and his mother. They've got a fresh start now. Clara nodded, her hands steady as she poured tea. I will, Jane. Ellen's feeling better, Tom says. You've given them hope. But what about you? Where's the next adventure? Miss Marple's eyes twinkled, her needles clicking. Trouble finds me, dear. For now, I'll enjoy your scones and a quiet day. Let's have a farewell tea this afternoon. Invite Tom, Silas, and a few others. It'll do the village good, too. Gather. Clara's face lit up. A tea. Perfect. I'll get baking. She hurried to the pantry, her steps light, and Miss Marple smiled. Clara was herself again. That was worth more than any watch. Miss Marple stepped out to make her final rounds, her tweed coat snug against the crisp air, her knitting bag slung over her shoulder. St. Mary's Hollow was alive with morning. Bustle, children laughed on the green. The baker's cart rattled by, and villagers nodded to her with shy smiles. The fear that had gripped the village, fueled by Grayson's letters and Blackwood's murder, was fading, replaced by cautious trust. But Miss Marple's sharp eyes missed nothing. A curtain twitched, a whisper cut off as she passed. Healing took time, and she meant to leave the village ready for it. Her first stop was the constable's office, where Mr. Dobbs was sorting the last of the box's papers. The burly constable looked up, his face breaking into a grin. Miss Marple, you're a legend, he said, pushing aside a stack. Grayson's confessed to the poisoning, Finch is naming names, and Wells is helping us track the money. We found more stolen goods in Grayson's cellar, enough to make half the village happy. Miss Marple settled into a chair, her knitting. Out. You've done fine work, Constable. Any more letters? Dobbs shook his head. Not since Lavinia came clean. She's promised to stop, and I believe her she was shaking when she told me. Said she wanted justice for Amos, but got carried away. I'll keep watch, but I think we're clear. Miss Marple's needles clicked, her eyes sharp. Good. Return those goods quickly, and let folks know the truth. Secrets breed trouble, but honesty builds trust. And Clara's watch safe now. Dobbs nodded, patting a ledger. Safe with her thanks to you. You've got a gift, Miss Marple? Ever think of joining the force? Miss Marple chuckled, her smile sly. I'm too fond of my knitting, Constable, but I'll always lend a hand. Keep an eye on Tom Carver. He's a good lad, but he needs guidance. Dobbs promised he would, and Miss Marple left, her heart light. The village was in good hands, but she had one more visit to Tom and his mother, Ellen, at their cottage near the forge. The small house looked brighter today, its garden tidied, a sign of hope. Tom answered her knock, his broad face tired, but relieved. Miss Marple, he said, stepping aside. Ma's up today. Come in. Ellen sat by a small fire, a shawl around her thin shoulders, her face less gray than before. She smiled weakly as Miss Marple entered, her knitting bag. At her side, Mrs. Carver, Miss Marple said, settling near her, You look stronger. Clara sends her best, and I wanted to check on you. Ellen's hands trembled, but her voice was steady. I'm mending, thanks to you. Tom told me everything, Grayson. The poison, the box. You saved us, Miss Marple. I was so scared after what I saw at Amos' house. Miss Marple's needles clicked, her voice gentle. You were brave, Ellen, telling us about that vial. It helped catch Grayson. You and Tom can start fresh now. Tom, leaning against the doorframe, nodded. I'm done with secrets, Miss Marple. Ma's getting better, and Silas says I've got a future at the forge. I'll make you proud. Miss Marple's eyes softened, her smile warm. You already have, Tom. Keep your mother safe and come to Clara if you need help. The village needs good hearts like yours. Ellen reached out, her hand squeezing Miss Marple's. You're a blessing, ma'am. Thank you. Miss Marple patted her hand, her heart full. Tom and Ellen were on their way, and that was enough. Her final stop was the village green, where she hoped to catch Lavinia Price. The pond sparkled, and Lavinia was there, sitting alone on a bench. Her face less pinched than before. Miss Marple approached, her smile disarming. Miss Price, may I sit? The village is looking up thanks to you coming forward. Lavinia's eyes flicked up, wary but softer. I don't deserve thanks, Miss Marple. I made things worse, sending those letters. I thought I'd keep Grayson's crimes in the open, but I scared folks instead. Miss Marple settled beside her, her knitting out. Fear makes us foolish, Lavinia, but owning it makes us strong. You've stopped now, and that's what counts. Let's help the village heal, share what you know, build trust. Lavinia nodded, her hands twisting her shawl. I will. I'm sorry for the trouble. You've got a way of seeing right through folks, don't you? Miss Marple's smile was sly. It's just an old lady with sharp eyes. Dear, keep yours open, and you'll do fine. She stood, leaving Lavinia with a thoughtful look. The first step toward redemption. Back at the cottage, Clara was in a flurry. Baking tarts and setting out her best china for the Farewell Scholars app to 3,000-word essay farewell tea. The village gathered, their faces bright with relief. Tom and Silas from the forge, Mrs. Tuttle from the post office, Mrs. Dodd from the bakery, and even Reverend Wells, his head bowed but his presence a sign of amends. Miss Marple stood, her small frame commanding the room, and spoke, her voice clear. St. Mary's Hollow is yours again, she said. The secrets are out, the thieves caught, and your treasures returned. Trust takes time, but you're strong. Keep talking, keep mending and you'll shine." The room erupted in applause, villagers hugging, laughing, some crying. Clara beamed, her watch pinned to her dress, and Tom raised a glass of lemonade, his grin wide. "To Miss Marple," he called, and the others echoed, their voices warm. As the tea wound down, Miss Marple slipped Clara a gift of pale blue shawl. She'd knitted, soft and warm. "For you, dear," she said, her eyes soft. "A reminder of our adventure." Clara hugged her, tears falling. "I'll miss you, Jane. You've changed everything." Miss Marple patted her cheek, her smile. "Sly, you changed it, Clara, by trusting me. Keep that heart open." They sat by the fire, sharing stories, the cottage glowing with warmth. The next morning, Miss Marple packed her small suitcase, her hat pinned neatly. Clara walked her to the station, the platform quiet, the train's whistle faint in the distance. Villagers waved from the green, their faces grateful, Tom with Silas, Lavinia with a shy nod, even Wells standing straighter. Miss Marple boarded, settling by a window, her knitting needles outdawed as the train pulled away. St. Mary's Hollow faded into the mist, its cottages and church tower a soft blur. Miss Marple's needles clicked, her mind replaying the case. The letters, the watch, Blackwood's murder, the midnight meeting. She'd unraveled it all, stitch by stitch, leaving the village whole. Her heart was full, but her eyes gleamed somewhere. Another puzzle waited. And she'd be ready. The countryside rolled by, green and endless, and Miss Marple smiled. Trust was fragile, but truth was strong. St. Mary's Hollow would carry on, and she'd carry its story, a quiet victory in her sharp, unyielding mind.